Welcome back to the Autocar Business Changemakers podcast in association with Tomorrow's Journey. I'm Felix Page, I'm Autocar's Deputy Editor. Joining me as ever in the studio, Chris Kirby, CEO of Tomorrow's Journey. Our guest today, Mike Nakrani, CEO of VEV, but you're happy for me to say VEV.
Very
Thank
happy.
you for joining us. How are you?
Very good. Great to meet you. Looking forward to today.
Thank you very much for coming in. Can you just explain a little bit about what you do, what VEV does,
Sure,
and how you got into it? If that's an easy question.
Yeah, sure. So
that's the 45-minute podcast done.
I'm actually going to head off.
Yeah. Okay. So VEV or VEV, it's a wholly owned subsidiary of a company called Vitol, which you've never heard of. Vitol's a large energy trader as such, and they asked me to come in and run their fleet decarbonisation business. So essentially what we do is we help large companies, think of large supermarkets, logistic companies, etc., figure out how to decarbonise their vehicle fleet. So that ranges from helping them understand what to do to then helping them implement what they need to do, including financing and running it afterwards through a digital platform. How do I end up here? Well, 20 years in the automotive space. I worked for Ford for a long time, but always in the edge cases, as I would call them, looking after smart mobility at Ford for a little while, and then joined BP to figure out how to do electrification, and then joined Vitol and set up this business called VEV since then.
Wow.
Pretty hectic journey, to be honest.
So Ford, were you based out of Dunton?
I was based in Dagenham, Dunton, then on to Cologne, then on to Russia, Moscow for a little bit, then on to Shanghai for a little bit, then back to Cologne, and then into Michigan, and that's when I came back to the UK.
Wow, what a journey. And now right at the, this is going to sound like such a contrived pun, right at the coalface of fleet decarbonisation,
Yeah,
which is, basically what we talk about all the time.
Yeah, I've been doing it a little while. I mean, I always think it took me a while to find a place where it's your mission, as I would call it, right? It's your learning kind of stuff. I love cars. I'm a petrol head as a kid kind of stuff, so it's a no-brainer to join a brilliant company like Ford. But the cross-section of, let's say, the car, automotive industry, with the cross-section of oil and gas, which is energy in my mind, and then digital, the three of them coming together, it's a bit. It feels like I'm working for Google 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah,
it's like we're quite lucky, right, Chris?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%,
it's the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah. You're sitting in that tech space with the ability to do stuff, create things. And I remember talking to you when you were first, in fact, probably just before, when you were on your way to Vitol. So it's been an interesting journey because you've not gone in to run a business that was already there, right? VEV is a new thing. You were first in the door into an office for
absolutely. I mean, I was sitting there again. We actually hired offices sitting above Zara, actually, kind of stuff, right? So I remember it was on Regent Street, right, near Oxford Circus, and it was a bit sort of, well, what are we doing here, kind of. It's a lot harder to start a new business from scratch. I've run big businesses for large companies before, right, and that's also very hard. But to create something where you're shaping the market and shaping the industry, and I mean, we all read the press and various other articles on the EV world, right? And there's so much misinformation out there, together with the business models are not proven, right? And people talk about experts, people claim to be experts in this space, and I kind of disagree a bit, right? Interview a lot of people, I say, I don't really think they're experts. I think there are people who've been doing it a bit longer than others, because you can't be an expert when the business model is shifting all the time. Yeah, so I could be an expert at something today, but tomorrow the business model looks completely different. And you're like, well, how did that happen? I don't know. How do we end up over here, kind of stuff, right? But I've been doing it for now, it's about 10 years or so. Right? Yeah. Lost all my hair, managed to get white hair in my beard.
You've gone for the same tech startup.
Two ball men in a beard.
Yeah, no.
Glimpse into my future, I think.
Yes, possibly.
I've got to ask, so 10 years ago, you came into the business, team of one, intimidating task. What was top of the to-do list? What was job number one?
Well, I think the first thing, whenever you start something new, is you've got to stand back a little bit, right? Because everybody wants you to come up with a series of answers, right? And the first thing you've got to do is digest, understand the market, but you also got to learn the stakeholders that you're working with. So when it was actually BP, when I first started to think about EV in any real depth, right? And the first thing we had to do was go understand the marketplace, understand what customers were doing. Now, very different from a BP versus the VEV business that I've set up, because BP has a lot. BP has 17,000 forecourts. It has 18 million customers who visit them every day. It has a digital platform. It has a brand. When I was VP of BP, I could ring up pretty much any CEO in the company in the UK and the phone would get answered. Now I ring up and say, hi, CEO of VEV, and they go, who? No, hang on, let me put you through to somebody over there. And you're like, no, I need to... But it's a C-suite conversation, unfortunately, because you're changing a big part of fleets, and I don't know how you found it, Chris, setting your stuff up, but a big part of it is you have to bring the people who are sort of at the operational level together, but the budget sits with the people in the C-suite. And what typically happens is somebody chucks a massive net zero. We're going to do it by 2030. And then the poor guy down the bottom goes, what? Huh? I can barely get some extra cash to get the goods indoor fix, right? Kind of stuff. And it's quite difficult, I found. But I thought that, so setting up VEV has been really quite exciting. It's taken us a little while to get going as we've set something up together. But what's happening is we're starting to become known in the marketplace and people are now starting to come to us. So the inbound inquiries are starting to happen. But the other bit, Felix, also did some cool shit. Some stuff that's pretty good fun, right?
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example, right? I mean, I never thought I'd do this, but I've got 4 divisions within my team that's set up 4 sort of customer segments, right? So segment 1 is buses, and sort of an unknown fact, when I was working at BP, I set up a joint venture with a company called DD, which is a ride-hail company like Uber, and we set up a joint venture there, and it's like now I think it's the 4th largest charging business in China, which is probably the 4th largest charging business in the world then, probably, in reality, right? But from setting it up originally, you kind of knew what to go do, right? You're charging forecourt business, you're going to B2C consumer set, B2C to B particular set. So, but what I realized is, well, the first time I landed in Shenzhen, every bus is electric in China. And that was 7.5 years ago. Yeah, so just every city, if you go to any large city in China, it's 100% electric on buses. The ride-hail vehicles are also migrating to 100% electric. 7 years ago. Sitting here in London right now, there are about 36,000 buses, give or take a little bit in London right now. In the country right now, and about 2,800 are electric in 2024. Right? So buses are going. So I have a bus team and I have a team, so refuse collection vehicles. Didn't know much about them, but they're also going electric. Right? So we ran a pilot just recently where we bought 2 trucks, ripped out the diesel powertrain, put in an electric powertrain, and then we gave it to 2 councils. And they've run them now.
Northamptonshire was one of them? Or?
Yeah, it's in Basingstoke and Rushmore, right?
Okay.
So anyway, working with a brilliant company called Serco to do it. Fantastic, forward thinking. If you think about their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, they're massive. And they've been running them for 8 weeks. They've been running them a lot longer. They won't give them back, just to be clear, right? Running for 8 weeks. But in that time, they proved that the product works, which I thought we kind of, as believers of EV, I don't know how you feel, Felix, but I know Chris and I are believers in it, right? Been driving one for many years and there's no issues at all. But can it work for a 26-ton truck that does 40 miles a day, that has a bin on the back that does 1,700 compressions? Yeah, I mean, the power takeoff use is greater than the actual mileage required to drive the vehicle as such, right? The answer is yes. So product tick, Maslow hierarchy of need. Second one, then, how much does it cost? Will the costs translate versus diesel to the electricity costs as such, right? And the answer is yes. It was 14% lower, right, based on the maths that we did collectively. So then the 2 big problem statements, which does the product work? Yes. Can I do it? Is it going to be more expensive than diesel? Well, actually, it's there or thereabouts, or maybe even better. And then the third problem then is a truck costs 400 grand instead of 200 grand. It's nearly double.
Right.
The third thing, there's tons of people out there who want to finance these things. We talked about the marketplace earlier, Chris, didn't we, right? But there's tons of large infrastructure funds who want to finance these large vehicles. Yeah. And so all 3 of those things are working, but we've got to get it out to the marketplace, Felix.
Yeah, it's cutting local emissions quieter as well, and easy sell. Can you speak to Sutton Borough Council?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think everyone listening to the podcast is going to go, can you speak to Mike? I don't want to get woken up at 7 a.m. by the noisy bin lorry whizzing down the road.
Yes, I'm happy to. We want to, because there's the knowledge is, again, the expert conversation, right? These things are starting to surface, and what's going to happen is the forward-thinking parties are going to jump on them, and they're going to start to accelerate, and then they're going to create some competitive advantage, and then the guys left behind are going to try and catch up. But you will know what it's like trying to catch up. It's really difficult, right? And so I think there are going to be people who are going to lead in a big way, and you're going to see that probably, I think, in a couple of years or so, give or take a little bit.
I've mentioned it on this podcast before, so I won't bang on about it, but one of the coolest events I've been to recently was BYD unveiling its electric double-decker bus for London a few weeks ago.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
I go to a supercar reveal every week, and that was, seeing that bus was transformative for me.
But here's the thing, every bus is electric in every major city in China. And when you talk about a city in China, you're talking about a country, aren't you, in reality? Right? I mean, there's 7,000 buses in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
7,000 was one depot. Sorry, let me go.
Well,
I got the wrong.
it's headquarters, isn't it?
Yeah. So and unfortunately, whether we like it or not, as a European or a Brit, the battery technology, I think, is the Chinese have got a lead of at least 10 years, maybe even a bit longer than that.
It's vertical integration as well, isn't it? They own that.
Make the batteries, build the vehicles, operate them,
and at scale, at the right quality level, all that kind of stuff, right? I think so. Vev's mission, if I call it right, so is essentially to help those large fleets move faster in an economical way, because you can do it for one, right? You can do it for two, because it's an innovation budget, right? But can you really migrate? I think Tesco have 5,500 vehicles as an example, or Sainsbury's have 4,000 or whatever it is. Can you really help someone migrate 5,500 vehicles? Bus companies, Stagecoach, National Express. I think Stagecoach have got like 7,000 to 8,000 vehicles.
Yeah.
Right, and they've already done 700 of them, but they need to do another 7,000 or so. What's the capex spend? 3 billion. It's huge money, right? So the value, I think, of let's say some people, it's an industry ecosystem problem. You've got to find the financiers, which I'm trying to do, and we've got some really good backing from Vitol and other financiers. You've got to find the technology enablers. You've got to find the automotive people, and the three coming together makes it, I think, quite radical.
Yeah, that's definitely that future of the marketplace has always been a collaboration thing, because the automotive market, as you know from your kind of pre-EV days, has been very siloed, vertical. No one talks to each other. Everyone wants to operate and be competitive. But in the new market that we're operating in, whether it's about changing some of the business models or whether it's about switching to EV or both, there has to be that collaboration, because people have realised you can't do all of it on your own anymore.
And you shouldn't. I mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
You shouldn't, right? I mean, fundamentally, it's mad, right? I mean, I was thinking, you've got to play. I think people have a core capability, right? And this is the pitch I make quite often to a lot of the C-suite, which is we're trying to build some knowledge and capability in the understanding and deployment of the EV ecosystem. And what we've done is we aren't the person that does everything in the ecosystem, right? I'm not an OEM, right? I'm not trying to become an OEM. That's not my goal. But what I am going to do is I'm going to be able to assess all the different OEMs and what they do, and be able to provide you with, this is the right one for you today. I'm not a financier, right? But I do know all the finance houses, and what I'm going to be able to do is say, right, I can link this together to you as such, right? What I am is the data science guy and the digital guy that connects all that together, in that ecosystem. That piece is me, and that's my core expertise, so I'll do that. But the other pieces are putting those jigsaw puzzles. And I guess the big thing I found when I first joined BP, but also still going on, I think, is in the e-mobility ecosystem, is I think the straight edges and the lines of the jigsaw puzzle are now clear. Right, so like when you do a jigsaw puzzle, you start teach my little daughter how to do jigsaw puzzle. Right, she's 4. It's like find the straight edges, find the corner pieces, put them out, kind of stuff. I'm sure you've all done them with Elsa and whatever. I don't know. You guys haven't got kids, have you? It'll come. Trust me.
No,
right?
I'm still learning. I'm getting there myself.
You're not sold me.
But really, I really wish Elsa would let it go. but the corner pieces are there, right? But you don't know what the picture is going to look like in the middle. But you found the edges. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. We're saying, look, the edges are clearer now. The product works. It's affordable, right? We can find somebody to support the capex. Therefore, we should start. And that's it's brilliant, but it's rock hard.
Yeah, and on that collaboration bit as well, it's an interesting analogy with the jigsaw puzzle, because it's a bit that there's not one box, like one company who's got all the pieces. That's the thing. It's like kind of got that frame, you know what it is, but there's 10 different people, 100 different people who hold 2 or 3 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're starting to get to a bit where people are putting them down and getting them together, but it's still a little way off.
And you're seeing that. You're seeing partnerships occur. The press there's a lot of stuff about partnership A or partnership B kind of stuff, right? And I think that's necessary. And I think people have got to stop thinking of things as threats, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because, I mean, Goldman Sachs that said that to get to net zero by 2050, they said that something like $1.5 trillion was required worldwide every year. Just think about that. Now, their number's probably made up, so let's cut it by 10, whatever, right? But it's still bloody, isn't it, right? And nobody has those pockets. It doesn't matter if you're a Saudi Arabian prince or if you're Elon Musk. You do not have the ability to do that. What you can do is play a part in the system. And so I think that collaboration point is really clear for me.
Sorry to keep asking sort of top level questions, because I know Chris has got some much more insightful things to say, but what do you need to know from a data science perspective, from a client looking to go take their fleet electric? What do you need to know?
I look at it as, let's say, our role as Vev is to actually make really complex things simple in a way, right? And it's really important to be able to do that for the customer, because otherwise, if I try and bring them on board and tell them everything we're doing behind the scenes, it's overwhelming, right? Because it's not so known, it's not an obvious answer. But so data, really, everyone thinks about data as the new oil and all the other stuff, and everyone gets excited, and it's my data and I want to make loads of money on it. The data that we're assessing today is relatively basic, actually. And if you start with the fleet, the first thing I need to know is how you use your fleet. Well, you know how you use your fleet. There's a telematics provider, and all I need is access to the telematics information. It's pretty basic, And so people are sometimes a bit reluctant to say, well, it's my data. It's like, well, yes, but in reality, it's just where you go, when you go, what time, how much fuel you use, etc. And what we then do is we then take that, and then we put it into our data science capability. We have an algorithm that we're building with a bit of machine learning. It's, again, the more input you put into it, the more accurate it becomes, kind of stuff. And it learns a little bit by itself, although we've got some minor AI capability on it, but it's early days and it'll get better over time. But what it does is it starts to say, okay, Felix's journey over the period of 1 year, statistically, we can guarantee that had he bought a Ford Transit short wheelbase, right, with a 90 kilowatt hour battery, could all be done electric today. And then we tie that, say, cost wise, if we look at the life cycle that Felix uses that vehicle for, and we lay against it the diesel cost structure, the vehicle, the fuel, the service and maintenance, the tyre wear, the brake dust, all the other stuff that you have to put together, not brake dust, brake wear, sorry, put that against. And then as an energy company, we map where we think energy prices are going to be for the next, it's a forecast, right? What's it going to look like for the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years?
So many variables, right? You can't.
Right. But we have a better feel for it than many others because, we have a massive trading capability whose core job is to manage energy, right? So we have a little bit more capability than most, but you're right, but it is forecast. And then we lay that together. And that information set gets overlaid with charging infrastructure, gets overlaid with grid power, gets overlaid with should you have a battery on site and some kind of microgrid solution. But what it allows me to then do is say, right, for Felix's vehicle, out of your 120 vehicles, those 30 can go electric today. And this is how much it's going to cost, best guess. And this is how, but I have very high statistical belief that you can do it in an electric vehicle. So you're addressing those 2 points, right? Which suddenly they go, oh, okay, because everyone comes in, they don't know where to start. If you're as an EV owner myself, right, you start off with, well, what's the range? I need as much range as possible, don't you? That's the first thing. As a fleet owner, that's a disastrous way to look at it. Because if that vehicle does one journey that is beyond the remit of the vehicle capability, you're carrying the weight of that battery and the cost of that structure for the entire vehicle life. Now, when you're driving around in a 1,000-kilometre, 40-ton truck, that's how everyone is today. That's how it's grown up. But they work on, if you look at the truck market, the logistics guys, they probably have very low margins. 3 to 5% probably is what they make on it. Now, if you try and do that with an EV, you'll end up with an EV with a 700 kilowatt hour battery. When maybe you need a 200 kilowatt hour battery, and you carry that for the life cycle of the vehicle. Why would you want to do that? There's no point in doing it, right? You've done it before in a diesel because no one cared, but an EV, it does matter. And it's that kind of stuff that we do, where we are trying to build our core expertise to say, don't waste your cash, right? We can do it on this, and then I'll stand behind it. If it goes wrong, I've got this big $400 billion giant called stand behind it. It gives me some of the credibility to say, we'll be here. Should it go wrong, we'll help you fix it. Right?
It's that bit about identifying the different, because you go back to your Tesco's example for thinking about their delivery vans, there'll be certain areas where the mileage is really low. So you go lower battery because it's low mileage, often back to the same depot. Somewhere it's a bit more rural and they need a different setup. But also that situation, I guess, will change over time, which is why a lot of the fleet stuff we've talked about is that whilst the vehicles have got a long lifespan, maybe the fleet operators don't want all of their stuff to be fixed into 5 year or plus, because they might want to go, actually now our situation's changed, we've opened a new depot here, so actually we need these ones to have slightly less and these ones have slightly more. So again, that marketplace ability to kind of move and trade vehicles around becomes really important as they grow and evolve.
Residual value, right, Chris? Residual value, right? So think about it this way, right? Everyone just think that EV's never going to last. Remember that the myth or EV. Oh my God, I'm going to have to change the battery. The battery's worth more than the car. Oh my God, it's awful, kind of stuff. And now you find Tesla said basically 200,000 miles, the battery's budged about that much. And plenty. It'll last another 10 years, right? The body will break. Just like an engine to some extent, right?
They've actually just offered us a 300,000 mile model S.
Exactly. So that myth. Now, just think about it. If you're running a fleet, and it could be anybody, right? What you'd end up doing, saying, well, I've got a vehicle that's still good enough but not good enough for the journey I'm doing now, to put that into a marketplace where somebody else is doing. I think I was reading somewhere, Royal Mail. If you think about the vans in Royal Mail, and they've got 5,000 of them that are electric right now, most of the vans only do 30, 40 miles a day, right? So if actually a fleet like, say, Amazon Delivery or Tesco or Sainsbury's or Aldi, whatever, has a fleet where they've been doing 200 miles a day and the battery's degraded by 10% over 5 years or so, actually to be able to put it into that marketplace you just talked about, Chris, and allow Royal Mail to take it when he does 30 miles a day, you've now extended the life of the vehicle. You've brought the capex investment down. You've now created a much better, longer life of the vehicle than you would have originally done, and it's a massive efficiency. But today, there's no marketplace like that.
Exactly.
Right, Chris, you've got to build it.
Does someone stop giving away all our trade secrets? We were talking about 10 minutes before this would be. We'll have to censor all that. But the bit that I was going to. The bit that actually I was going to say about that, the point you mentioned earlier about the refuse collection trucks being twice the price, but actually if they last more than twice as long, they're actually cheaper. But it might be, as you say, that it might be that the particular operator doesn't want to or can't operate that particular vehicle. They don't want to commit to it.
Or
they
lose the contract.
Or they lose the contract to change it. But as long as those things can move around. But I still think that as much as the residual value stuff people are panicking about on EVs, in 5 years' time will be on its head, because they're just going to last so much longer. We've talked before about I just had a Tesla Model 3 for a few weeks. My partner's had it. A 3-year-old, 60,000 miles. You're not getting into a new car because it had a software update. We had a guy from Valeo coming in talking about software-derived vehicles. If you got one of those, your Royal Mail example, you got a vehicle come back. It has a software update. It has a few cosmetic changes, a couple of things to update the interior, and then it goes back out, but just with the battery at 80% of what it was originally, then these things will just go on forever, but through multiple life cycles and users.
I think exactly right. I think it takes the more you can extend the vehicle life, the better the return, especially from a fleet perspective, right? Because essentially, what's happening is, traditionally, I think fleets used to buy vehicles, especially company car fleets, on a 3-year cycle. Right? And in reality, the 3-year cycle was dictated around the MCA cycle, the mid-cycle freshening on a car. I think someone saw new bits on it, they wanted a new one. It just sort of became the format, and the warranty stopped at 3 years, and so the first MOTs required at 3 years. So it was kind of like let me chop it in. I don't want any hassle, right? That kind of stuff. But you sit there thinking, well, there's no emissions because it's EV. Fundamentally, there's significantly less parts on the vehicle, so actually it's going to durability wise, right? And actually it's a tech platform, so fundamentally the software can be updated and you get wonderful new features that keep you feeling pretty cool about it. So suddenly you can keep it for longer in the first place. So then you start thinking, okay, it's starting to become, I think, a world where vehicles longer term, especially vans and trucks and buses,
there'll still be a bit of brand, a bit of new, it's the latest thing.
Correct.
Who cares in a van? If it does the job, who cares if it's the latest model?
Fundamentally, what you want, you're going to have to find a way of extending the vehicle cycle life. And if you can extend the vehicle cycle life, that extra cost of the battery, even at today's prices, become affordable. Now, what happens in 10 years when the battery prices have come down by another 30%? I think there's still some to come, right? I mean, you can buy battery, I think, per kilowatt hour installed. Volkswagen claim they want to get to 80 kilowatt hours, $80 per kilowatt hour, and then it's similar with diesel, but it's touching 100 already now. So it's getting there, right?
From a fleet management perspective, though, isn't there an argument against the battery degradation that you were talking about? Is there not an argument for those fleets having a buffer in their batteries so that they can manage charging schedules more efficiently? Because if all their if their fleet has 80% battery capacity, that means every van in that fleet needs charging more often, which is more pressure on your internal charging network that you've set up. So how do you manage that?
And that comes to the science, the data science and the expertise, because not every battery is going to degrade the same. But let's use that hypothetical to know if there is. But if you think, typically, fleets of vans especially, what happens is they run a shift. Some run 2 shift, and those are going to be more difficult to do than a single shift. There are very few that run a 3-shift pattern. You know, like the days when I used to work at Dagenham where we were running 3 shift to build engines and stuff, right? So a 2-shift pattern is rare. 1-shift pattern is more normal. It might be a 10 or 11 hour shift, but it leaves you a window of 11, 12 hours, right? So you've got to be able to manage the journey that the vehicle's got to do the next day. You've got all sorts of charging options, right? You can charge a 7 kilowatt AC connection all the way through to, if you really want to go big guns, you can charge and put in, even at your depot, a 150 kilowatt speed DC charger. If you're mad, you could put a 350 kilowatt DC charger too, right? And then you've got your grid capacity, which is another constraint. So those are the factors that are unknowns. Now, but I've got Felix's understanding of what he uses the vehicle for. I can figure out what the schedule is for him the next day, right? The software platform will manage that for you.
Okay.
And what it does, it will even manage saying, right, Felix's van, he's using it a lot, where Chris is not using it much. It's time to swap them. It's time Chris took over Felix's van and Felix takes over, or swap the routes. Yeah. You've got a choice to make, right? But you're actually actively managing the fleet.
Yeah, okay.
And also even like your charge levels and things as well. So you go, me and Felix are out tomorrow. He's got to do 150 miles. I've only got to do 75. Yeah. So you put more energy into here's the mine because you're balancing your plastic. So all of that stuff is things you just wouldn't have the control over.
Super exciting. Because it could, remember, typically when you're if you think about what's happened for the past at least 50 years, but possibly even much longer than that, right? Essentially, if I'm a fleet manager, my biggest hassle is probably my drivers, right? I give them a fuel card, and I map the journeys that they've got to do. And now what happens is very little information comes back to them, bar they look up a fuel card. And they've got a telematics capability, but in reality, they don't really use the telematics capability a lot, I'm finding. Right? They do it at certain hotspots, but not really. Yeah. Now what happens is, with the GPS location, with all the sensors that are on the vehicle, with the information both on the charger, the grid, and also the vehicle type, you can now come up with a very space age kind of thought process of knowing where everything is dynamically, so you can manage your fleet. Now then you've got too much information. You're like, oh my God, what do I do with that? And that's when you need the capability of AI and other stuff, right? Yeah. But the way I'm holding it is, if you have a large fleet today, then you're managing a very large fuel card business. And you spend tens of thousands of dollars or pounds every month on fuel. Today, you've got 2 EVs, so you don't even think about your energy bill. I know we had the gas spike and all that, and I understand restaurants and stuff, we use a lot of energy. It's a really big deal for them, together with supermarkets, with fridge and stuff. But just think of it from a fleet perspective. I've got 2 cars that are electric, and I've got 100 vans that are diesel. I'm thinking about my diesel bill a lot, I'm not really thinking about this. Now, when you've got 100 vans that are electric, that 10 grand a month you're spending on diesel is now going to be in the energy system. Now, the energy system is far more volatile than diesel, believe it or not. Right? Because it's linked to gas prices, and gas prices are linked to what happens in the renewable intermittent space, right? And it's linked to what power can I get to that location at that time. And what happens is, people don't realise this, but if you buy energy today, you get a half-hourly window. Right? So 48 different half-hour points for your energy bill, and then you give that to somebody and they give you a price for the year, and you fix for the year based on the amount of energy you said roughly you were going to use, right? Anytime you go significantly above that, you go onto the market. You have no clue what that is. Yeah. By the way, anytime you use significantly less than you were going to do, you go to the market, because the energy company says, look, I'm not taking that risk, Felix. Chris, that's not my problem. The fact that you used twice the amount of energy you were meant to use that day. Now, I've done a deal with Energy Partner over here who supplies me energy, and I've said you're going to stay within that window. When you go above that window, the contract says I charge you whatever they charge me. And most people don't know. And when it's only 2 vehicles, you don't care. When it's 200 vehicles...
How generous does that window tend to be?
10%.
Really?
Maybe even less.
And they only do it every half hour. That seems like a big link.
Every half. Remember, you have to have a meter that can measure every half. It's a lot. There's all sorts of billing and taxation. It's really complex. And what happens is the poor person who has to buy it is like, oh my God, what the hell? I don't know how to do this kind of stuff. Right?
Especially as the fleet manager of a 1,000 vehicle fleet, you know about energy trading.
No, and also it's normally bought by the property guy,
Yeah.
not by the fleet guy, right? I buy my own fuel card, but I don't buy that.
Yeah.
And now the property guy goes, I've got no idea how to do this. And that's where we think there's a place that we can play, right? We can say, hang on, we understand the energy markets. We understand how much power you're going to buy. We understand how much power you're going to use. Let us figure out how to do that for you. And let's keep you as close as we can within the 10% band.
Of course.
So you've got stability. And again, this starts to become complex again, right? It is, and that's what I'm saying. Trying to take a complex situation.
Because it's been really simple for the last 5 minutes.
No, but do you get what I mean, right? It's really difficult. It's super exciting.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
And it has to be done digitally. There's too many information points. There has to be some form of AI algorithm capability.
Well, this is where the AI modelling comes in,
all
right?
of that. And that's where I'm really excited about it. I mean,
It creates massive opportunity as well, right? I still think with some of this stuff, whilst a lot of it is unknown, it's the same thing about like maintenance schedules on EVs. Everyone panics about it, but people panic about it because it's unknown. But the reality is actually going to be really good because they're going to be much easier to maintain. They're going to last longer. It'll be the same with energy. You know, the guy who has a fuel card who just looks at his. I can remember the fuel card reports when I first had a fuel card working with one of the OEMs, and you get the report every month. You do your expenses off it. So it's so retrospective, looking back, and how do you have any control? But actually, you get to a point where you're managing the energy. You're putting charge into your vehicles at the point where there's surplus in the grid, all of that stuff. Because with the change, it's terrifying, but the opportunities that it creates
it's
is
massive. It brings that industry, I think, Chris. It fast forwards them into the digital AI ecosystem, and it's, to be honest, it's difficult. So what's going to happen is you're going to find players are fighting it for a while. And, you know, we've done a lot of work with a lot of fleet managers, and to be fair, they've got a really tough job. It's not easy at all, right? And they've been given this task of reduce your CO2 by 30% on your fleet. They don't know which vehicles to buy. They don't know what charging infrastructure to put in. They have no idea the grid capacity costs.
Yep.
They don't know how to run the fleet when it's electric. Right, so they don't understand the residual value management piece. That's going to really hurt them if at the end of 3 years they end up with, you know, taking a bath on all the residual values or whatever, and they don't know how long they're going to last. All these things are what I would call meeting your mate in the pub kind of conversations today. And the bit I would say to them is actually step back, take a deep pause of breath. There are people like us that exist who know a little bit more just because that's our full-time job. That's what we've been doing, right? Not because we're any more intellectually smart, but just because it's, you know, we're seeing experiences of 50 people, whereas you're seeing your experience of an individual. And when we do, honestly, we've run some focus groups probably about a year and a half ago, and you had a bunch of fleet managers going, you know, I'm just going to leave. I can't deal with this. I'm going to find another job somewhere else, kind of stuff, right? And it is stressful. But I would say, if they go into that ecosystem and find partners to help them, suddenly they go, this is a breath of fresh air. Yeah, I can get back to doing what I do. And I'm really good at managing the drivers. I'm really good at managing the schedule of my customers. I'm really good at managing returns. I'm really good at making sure the security on the site is good. All that stuff I can carry on doing because there's somebody else who can handle that stuff. Right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and get you much better visibility of what's happening with those vehicles, you know, understanding how they're performing, how they're being used, all of that stuff, because that will be the data benefit that they get. It's just that you can't have the learnings in advance unless you work with a partner who has got their own learnings in advance.
Exactly, the lessons learned, and is continually feeding that back, because coming back to the point I was making earlier, the answers are not known yet fully. Yeah, the most efficient pathway is not there yet. Pathways are working to make it good, but actually over time, you know, if you think like everything, when people provision, especially in a Western-based society, right, when we do provision, we say, oh, plus or minus 10%, right? But if you're spending £1 million a year on fuel, 10%'s a lot. What you want to be is plus or minus 1% is reality what you want to be, right?
But that doesn't give you that flexibility then, does it?
No. Well, but it doesn't. But do you need the flexibility, Felix?
Well, this is what I was going to ask you a second ago, is how accurate can you be in your modelling, not just in terms of energy prices and whatnot, but as a fleet operator, you have to account for, that dual carriageway's closed, so my driver's got to do 10 more miles today going around the side streets and all that sort of thing. They add up. So if 10 drivers have to do 10 extra miles a day over the course of a week, blah, blah, blah. How can you be confident in a 1% margin of error on energy costs if there is that?
I don't think you can be confident on 1%, Felix. Not today, right? But what you can be is better than the 100% provision that people are asking for now. And I think it starts off like, let's use the truck industry for a moment, right? I've talked to a lot of the truck guys. It's really interesting. I was talking to one guy in Belgium, super guy, family-run concern, just shy of 1,000 trucks, right? And he and I were debating hydrogen versus EV kind of stuff, right? And he's based in Antwerp, kind of stuff, right? Anyway, so having a chat with him. I said to him, like, okay, we had a great chat. Give me the information. He was like, I was asking some basics. How many kilometers a day does your vehicle do? How many are 2 shift? How many are 1 shift? Anyway, it's like, and so it took him a little while to find the access to the telematics data. Eventually got it, sent it over to us, right? And just something worthwhile mentioning, one of the reasons I'm focusing on large vehicles is I want a meaningful impact in the CO2 reduction.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
2% of, let's say, trucks are roughly medium and heavy duty for Europe, but 2% of the vehicles that exist and run today in the fleet in Europe, and they count for 27% of road transport emissions, right? So if we don't fix those, in reality, the other stuff is also important, but there's 27% that need to be addressed, right? So he started going through his data and started to understand now he buys the most expensive truck he can buy because of that one-off. Because he said quite often my guys do a trip that requires a 1,200 kilometer, I think he said 1,200 kilometer fuel tank. I had 5 years worth of his data. It happened twice. Twice. Yeah. Now, just for a moment, perception is reality, of course, right? So when you put that back to him, he's like, I did not know that. Yeah. He remembers, because remember that it was etched in his brain that one time some bloke had to do something, whatever it was, right? And I said, so you've overpaid on every truck. Instead of getting a 500 kilometer tank or a 600 kilometer tank or whatever you might need to be doing. And then we went into things like weight categories. Why do you have a truck that can haul 40 tons? How often do they carry 40 tons? That one he was more right on. They do haul a lot, actually, to be fair, right? But just that type of information, it exists today, and what's happening is the EV revolution is enabling these guys to think differently about how they do their business. Yeah, so it's actually disrupting, or maybe disruption is the wrong word. It's enabling them to look again at what they traditionally do, right? Which they haven't looked at, because what's happened is the market's just sat at the same level because everyone operates in the same way. So therefore, you're actually competitive wise, right? Everyone's always buying a 1,000 kilometer truck.
Even if someone's doing it badly, if everyone's doing it badly, you're competitive, right?
Yeah, so you're, but what's happening is like, oh, okay, now, and you could see it was really interesting. So now he's gung-ho, he's like, okay, I'm in. And, he's in it because he sees the competitive advantage, right? Yeah. And so he's going to buy some DAF and Volvo trucks pretty soon, and he's going to start to deploy them. We're going to put the charging infrastructure down, we're going to help him run it, help him finance it, do all that kind of stuff with it, right?
Yeah. What we've not talked about is how good this sort of thing is for battery supply in general, in a global sense, because if people are buying the batteries they need rather than double the size they need, then there's more to go around, and
it's a very good point.
Battery costs come down and cars
very good point.
get more usable and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, very good point. I mean, there's innovation happening in China. I was actually in India last week talking about this with where you're seeing people are now creating different size battery pack deployment for trucks. So you can have a system where it's like a battery swap system, but ignore the swap for a moment. As in, you have 3 battery packs sat there, and your trucks are able to forklift in and out the battery. So when Chris wants to go on a 200-mile journey, you put 1 in. When Felix wants to go on a 300-mile journey, you put 2 in. So you don't have to carry the weight. In Europe today, I think in the UK as well, the government gives you a 2-ton reprieve for a zero-emission vehicle. So a 40-ton truck, if you put a big battery in it, probably ends up being 44 tons, but you're only allowed to carry 42 tons on the road. So therefore you lose 2 tons of payload.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? I haven't said that very well.
No, I get that. Yeah.
And so basically you're going to have to carry less, and that's going to cause you cost, time, effort, whatever more, right? If you can now put only the size of the battery you need for the journey you need to go do it, and it's variable, so you can pick the bigger battery pack. Again, it's innovation. I'm not saying it exists today in the UK or in Europe, but I'm seeing it in China. I'm seeing it in India, where they're leading us by about 10 years.
That kind of thing's definitely going to happen. And then going back to the data point as well that you were saying about how do you get that 1%, where you looked at the Belgian guys, I think you were looking at it retrospectively for 2 years, you would have that data in real time. So you would start to say, we're seeing the trend over the last 30 days is that every Tuesday you've got a spike in something. You can start to be more reactive, proactive in that more dynamic space, coming into like swapping the batteries or swapping your fleet, because you're going, we're seeing the general trend of distance in this particular depot has gone up 10% in the last 2 months, therefore we need to think about how we redeploy vehicles. It's not a once a year we'll look at our telematics data and get, because someone's going, what's your average energy use, and you go, I don't know, I'll log into the telematics provider, I did that many miles, or I did that many things. So you can start to adapt things as you move, which is exciting part.
Some of the dashboards we're creating, Chris, and it's still early days, right? So I don't want to pretend that we have the solutions at all, but they're really the insights you're getting from real world information is really kind of, I didn't know I'd be a bin man and a bus man, right? But I'm really enjoying it.
It's also the predictiveness of it as well. That's the thing, is that bit about being able to create action. So one of my least favourite phrases in automotive is about data being the new oil. You mentioned earlier, and I think you've heard the same things, right? Because that's like turning up to my house with a barrel of crude oil. That's no value to me. I can't do anything with it unless I can refine it, unless I've got the skills to refine it and distribute it and like all those things. So, but this is where we see those use cases. So the first thing is like all the fleets have got data, but it's worthless to them if they don't do anything with it. The second thing is, can you produce some stuff with it as dashboards that's useful? Great, step one. But actually what you need to do is that data needs to then be able to inform actions or even automate the actions. So you go, we've produced this data, and our thing for next month's fleet, we're going to complete your redistribution of batteries. You're going to take 20% of these vehicles back into the vehicle marketplace and bring these other vehicles in, but to do it all from the data. So someone's not having to look at and interpret a dashboard. It's the actions part. And that's the journey that it goes through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what it was is you didn't have the digital information set, you didn't have the GPS digital set before. So what's really happened is the data is collected, so you can then do something with it. It's actually not. It's not actually brilliant, and the insightfulness is the analysis you do on it.
Yes.
Yeah. But you could do it manually today. You and I could sit back and go, okay, let's figure out how many trucks I've got. Let's figure out how many and what journeys they do. Let's write down. We could go to each speedometer and go, right, they did 20 miles today. They did 20. You could do all that, right? But it's the digitization and the volume of it that allows you to then start to make those statistical representations, right? But how many people? The problem is, a lot of the time today, I find it's all anecdotal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
when you cut the noise out and you get down to the basics, right, and you start to be able to say, okay, that's a myth, that's reality. Because there's also truth. There are some vehicle types where it's going to be really difficult for the EV proposition in its today's format for it to work. Yeah, you're going to have to change the way you operate. Now that is difficult to do. So don't start with them. Start with them. It's like, it's a bit like, I always sit there thinking, it's radical, I quite often, everyone always brings the edge cases.
Yeah.
You're like, of course you shouldn't do the black cases. Why would you do the edge cases? Just stay diesel. I'm like, yes, it's bad. We'll live with it. We'll do some carbon capture. We'll do something, right? But why? That's not the one to prove it out on. Let's prove it out on this one. And
that's always the thing. I had a thing recently, we probably mentioned it on here as well, but I wrote a post back in January on LinkedIn about, I'd done a drive to Scotland in my Polestar that I had at the time. And one of the guys that commented, I ended up having like a backwards and forth with this guy, because he was just like, I just wouldn't because I'd said I'd stopped for an hour over the course of the journey, and he was like, well, I only stopped for 20 minutes, blah 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 blah. And anyway, got down to it, and he was going, I'm a long distance parcel delivery driver, and I regularly drive to Scotland. And I'm like, okay, mate, you're not the one. You're not the one for this. And I think my final comment was going, okay, definitely you shouldn't have an EV, but like everyone else should, right? Are we agreed? And he just disappeared out of the chat. But it was this thing where he was kind of making this argument based on this like fringe use case that he regularly does courier deliveries from London to Scotland. Mate, stay in your diesel.
Yes, exactly. Or make it a hybrid at least. Make it a diesel hybrid at least, right? It'll be able to. But
there's 99% of other people that we can deal with first, but that person's telling everyone else they shouldn't have an EV. That's
you just very concisely summed up Twitter for me. Basically what we get on that. I think we are going to have to bring this to a close. I know it's a very tough industry to sum up in 45 minutes, but I can at least make a joke about it being a fleeting glimpse into as I've wanted to do for 15 episodes. I've finally managed to get that in there. But Mike, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. It's been fascinating to get
it's a real pleasure, guys. And I'd like to be fair, like, the industry is not yet finished, right? There's loads of stuff to it. The answers are not fully known and stuff, right? But if I can make one pitch to the audience as such, right? It's exciting, it's fun, and it is working, right? It is absolutely working, and push harder. Yeah, that's a key thing. So thank you for giving us the time today as well.
No worries. You've got me excited about data, so you've achieved the
it sounds like a Star Trek thing, doesn't it? Right?
Exactly.
Right. Fantastic. Lovely to meet you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mike. Thank you to you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.